Get a cup, get a cup, get a cup. Hello, hello, welcome back everyone to another video on Fresh Cut Slam. Today we're looking at the Blue's Clues X Law and Order Theory by Alex Bale. Now, I have not seen Blue's Clues in about 2 months. I'm joking, it's been like, I don't know, 20 years or something? Something crazy, it's been a long time. But with that being said, the original link's in the description. Make sure you go subscribe to Alex Bale. Without any further ado, let's begin.
Hi there! Blue's Clues is an educational children's TV
Is he holding a shotgun to his face? What is this?
show about a man named Steve who lives in a magical world where he spends his day talking to inanimate objects, jumping through picture frames, and trying to find clues to help understand his magical blue dog. Law and Order is a gritty, realistic police procedural / legal drama that involves New York City homicide detectives trying to solve murders and prosecute criminals.
Yeah, made by Dick Wolf. I don't know why I know that. I think it's just because of the name.
These two shows are very different. You could not find two shows more polar opposite than Blue's Clues and Law and Order. And yet, despite this, not only do I believe that these two shows exist in the same universe, but I'm also going to be proving that the entire Blue's Clues show is actually just a fantasy inside of the mind of a single Law and Order side character. Yes, I am being serious. I know that sounds crazy, but
What? Blue's Clues has been around for a long time, and Law and Order has, but which one came first? If Law and Order came first, then this itself would make some more sense. But if Blue's Clues came first, then like Law and Order, like how could you friggin' say the dream came before the friggin' person? That's what I'm trying to get at.
just stick with me, because I'm pretty sure that I have discovered a 29-year-old secret that has never been talked about before today. Get ready, because this is the Blue's Clues Law and Order Theory.
How did you even come up with this in the first place? Like, that's so insane. Where's Dick? Where's Dick Wolf?
By far, the most common type of fan theory is the dream theory. The idea that everything happening in a story is actually all just inside of a character's head, whether they're stuck in a coma, or they're dreaming, or hallucinating, or they're actually dead. Pretty much every piece of media has some kind of dream theory. And it's sort of the lazy, low-hanging fruit of fan theories.
Because it's just, like, easy to explain.
You can just apply it to literally anything, and usually there's never actually any evidence besides, "Whoa, this show is so crazy and unrealistic, that must mean it's a dream!" Ah! And surprisingly, the
I've heard people say that about real life.
show that seems to have the most of these types of fan theories is Blue's Clues. You got Steve is actually schizophrenic, Steve is actually in a mental asylum, Steve is actually a drug addict, Steve is actually in prison, Steve is actually a murderer who killed his parents.
All of those could simultaneously be correct at the same time.
My god. Even I made a parody of these theories back in 2017.
So yeah, it's a pretty basic, normal kid show. Steve, a 30-year-old schizophrenic who killed his parents, pretends to be a kid.
You know, that was before I dedicated my life to making fan theories about kid shows. And look, I understand the appeal of these types of theories. It's fun to take something innocent from your childhood and give it a dark, edgy plot twist.
This is like Five Nights at Freddy's right here. What if we take a stuffed bear and then it eats people?
That's kind of literally my job right now. But why are there so many of these theories about specifically Blue's Clues? Well, I think it's because everything about this show has always felt fake.
I'm sorry, but I cannot get over the idea that this, I guess it's a microphone or whatever he's holding in his hand, is the barrel of like a shotgun. And he's just like talking into it the whole time.
Steve is the only real person.
You're telling me this man's not jumping into paintings like friggin' Mario?
in this world. He looks like a young adult, but he acts like a child. And he lives alone in a house where he spends his day jumping into picture frames or talking to unseen voices or inanimate objects. It just kind of sounds like I'm describing someone who is experiencing some kind of false reality.
100% it does.
Even the way Steve moves around is strange. He never actually leaves the room, he just kind of pretends to walk in place while this fantasy world moves around him.
Come on.
I mean, obviously we know why, because it's a green screen, but yeah, when you're thinking of it as not actually him being an actor, but an actual show, it is odd. Also, this show was really successful. Why did they decide to keep doing this instead of, like, expanding it so that he could actually just walk into a different room? You know, I'm sure they have the money to build 2 sets.
Obviously, that was more of a filming limitation, but it still adds to this feeling of fakeness. But other than these surface-level weird vibes the show gives off, there's never actually been any strong evidence to prove one of these theories. And believe me, I and others have looked. It has been 28 years since this show first came out. You know, you'd think...
Are they still making it? I knew Steve left and someone else replaced him. Well, I think that's because he was going bald or something.
If there was actually some kind of smoking gun here, we would have found it by now. But what if that's because we've all been looking in the wrong place? So, the other day, I stumbled upon an interesting piece of Blue's Clues trivia. A year after Steve Burns filmed the Blue's Clues pilot, he had a small role in an episode of Law and Order. And I thought the...
Okay, that's interesting. So the creator of this show, of Blue's Clues, was in an episode of Law and Order. Now, did he write an episode of Law and Order? Was he just an actor or something in it? Because if he was an actor in it, then it's not like he's able to determine, you know, the plot.
The idea of seeing Steve from Blue's Clues in a gritty, realistic cop show was kind of funny, so I decided to track down the 1995 episode titled Cruel and Unusual.
Wait a minute, wait. This guy, Steve, he's the actual creator of the show? I didn't know that. So you're telling me he was actually in an episode of Law and Order? That's cool. I didn't know that.
The 1995 episode titled Cruel and Unusual. Just a heads up, this episode deals with some pretty serious subject matter.
Special Victims Unit!
In this episode, Steve Burns plays a kid with autism named
It's actually
Kevin
him!
Jeffries.
Good morning, how are you?
Great.
What time is it?
10:15.
No, it's 10:18.
We learn that Kevin has trouble communicating with others and often harms himself. So his parents sent him to live in a children's behavioral clinic.
Just what was the behavioral clinic doing for him?
When Kevin was 10, he started to hurt himself.
We didn't know what to do. We couldn't keep Kevin here. We had to send him away.
We later find out that the doctors at this clinic were horribly mistreating him by giving him intense electroshock therapy and forcing him to wear a sensory deprivation helmet for days.
He kept Kathy in this helmet for 3 straight days. This helmet cut off the blood supply to our daughter's brain.
Wait, what was the context there? Hold on, what? This is a different kid's mom. Okay. Sensory deprivation can be pretty crazy. If you're doing that for days, that would be not a good time. I don't see how it would cut off blood supply, though. If it's sensory deprivation, that would block your ears, block your eyes, so that you can't see or hear anything. I don't know how that would cut off blood supply to the brain.
The episode starts with Kevin after he's escaped from the facility, but tragically he gets arrested and later succumbs to the injuries sustained from his abuse and dies.
I don't know, Mike. I think the kid's dead.
And the rest of the episode follows the detectives investigating his death. So yeah, this is a very sad and serious episode, and it deals with some real...
How are you gonna say that it's all in his head then when he died, and then the show keeps going on for another 20 years after that? What?
Systemic issues that are still a problem today. And like I was saying, this show is clearly very, very different than Blue's
Oh my gosh.
Clues. But what I find interesting about this is that for years, people have been trying to prove that Steve is actually in prison or a mental facility, and now we have this piece of media where we see Steve's actor in that exact position, and as far as I'm aware, no one's ever really talked about this. I mean, sure, Kevin's not schizophrenic, he has autism, but seeing as how he was being abused and put into sensory deprivation for days where he couldn't hear or see anything, you can kind of imagine that anyone in that position might try to escape to some kind of fantasy inside of their head.
That makes sense, okay? I'll agree with that. But what doesn't make sense is that, you know, this guy in the Law and Order world, who, if he is the one having these hallucinations or whatever, he's not around to experience it anymore, but the show is still going.
So yeah, I thought this was an interesting coincidence, but at the end of the day, that's kinda all it was. Like, obviously, just because the same actor shows up in two different shows doesn't mean they're actually connected. But then, I took a closer look at this episode, and I started to notice more and more weird similarities between Kevin and Steve. At first, it just started with some little things. We are told by Kevin's parents that he was learning to draw.
Thanks to him, Kevin was learning to draw.
And in every episode of
So he's drawing all this stuff?
Blue's Clues, Steve draws in his handy-dandy notebook.
Our handy-dandy? Notebook. Let's draw a rectangle, and there. Cheese.
Okay, but so what? Lots of kids like to draw. But we are also told that when Kevin harmed himself, he was strapped to a chair.
We put them in a chair, and then we hold them there using soft cuffs.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve
No, did my internet go out? Oh my gosh. It is out. Oh, for F's sakes, dude. All right, I guess we're gonna end this here, and I'll have to continue on whenever the internet comes back. All right, we are back. I don't know what the frig. Seems like we have internet now. All right, let's go. I'm gonna go back a little bit just to kind of refresh what was going on.
Okay, but so what? Lots of kids like to draw. But we are also told that when Kevin harmed himself, he was strapped to a chair.
And everything in Kevin's world is like drawn though, too, right? Or Steve's world.
We put them in a chair, and then we hold them there using soft cuffs.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve spends a lot of time in his thinking chair.
We're ready to sit in our
Thinking chair.
Now that we're in our thinking chair, let's think.
And then, when Kevin escaped the facility, he kept asking people what time it was.
What time is it?
10:15.
What time?
How
you doing today, huh? What time?
Now,
No, don't tell me it's gone again. It says I still have internet. Why? Oh my gosh.
What time?
Now, it is common for some people with autism to rely on specific schedules or routines,
That's very common. Very common.
but what time it is also really important in Blue's Clues.
What time is it? What time is it now?
Steve has a cleanup time,
We just had cleanup time.
a nap time.
It's Blue's nap time.
Now it's time for so long. There's a talking clock. And most of all, every day, Steve has mail time.
That is weird. I mean, it does look like it's building up to be more than just a coincidence. The timeline doesn't make sense though. First off, hear me out. Who wrote this show? Who wrote Blue's Clues? And then who wrote that episode of Law and Order? Do they have any correlation? Why would two shows written by two completely different people have... I'm trying to figure out how to like put this into words. There's two shows written by two completely different people. Why would they all of a sudden intertwine with each other in the same universe where the show Blue's Clues all of a sudden takes place in this kid's head? It does kind of look like that. Don't get me wrong, it does look like that. But it's at the same time, it's like, so are the writers for this episode of Law and Order working with Steve, or whatever this guy's name is, trying to come up with something to put into the show to kind of explain Blue's Clues? That might be the case, but that seems kind of far-fetched. So, I don't know.
Hey, Blue! The mail's here!
So yeah, there's some weird similarities here, but nothing actually concrete. I didn't really start to take any of this seriously until I realized. After Kevin escaped, we are told that he went to a movie theater. And guess what he did in the theater?
Movie started at 10. He was out of here by 10 after 10. Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
Kevin got out of his seat and tried to walk into the screen. Doesn't that...
That is wild. Maybe the writers actually did work with Steve or Kevin, whatever his actual name is, to try to like intertwine the worlds or something like that together. Because that is, you know, you're starting to get, there's more. This seems to be more than a coincidence at this point. That is wild.
That sound exactly like Steve Blueskadooing into a picture?
Blueskadoo, we can too.
Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
This kind of feels like more than a coincidence.
That's what I'm
This is
saying.
when I first started to consider. Is it really possible that Kevin Jeffries from Law & Order is the real Steve, and Blue's Clues is all a fantasy he created to escape his abusive reality? Okay, I know you're not convinced yet.
I'm saying there are a lot of coincidences, or I've learned over the last few years that there's really no such thing as coincidence. And this, it seems like it's definitely leading to be the case where it's not just a coincidence. I just don't understand. Like you said, this Blue's Clues just piloted. It just started. So this show, which is new, which doesn't have any big history, which doesn't have notoriety, why would all of a sudden the creators of Law & Order, I'm not sure how long Law & Order had been going on for when they made this episode with Steve in it, but why would that show all of a sudden be like, okay, let's intertwine these two shows together? That's what doesn't make sense to me. Is that although it seems like it is, why would they be like, okay, so you also acted in this other show. Let's try to blend the worlds together to explain this other show that you also acted in. Like, that doesn't make sense. But it seems like that is also the case.
And to be honest, neither was I. But don't worry, we are just getting started. Kevin's behavioral clinic is in New York City, and the one time characters actually leave the Blue's Clues fantasy world and go to the real world, they end up in New York.
Blue's Clues in New York City? This is epic!
Also, in the very first episode of Blue's Clues, we can see a newspaper from the New York Times inside of Steve's house, strongly implying that's actually where he lives. We can also see objects from Blue's Clues in Kevin's life. In Kevin's parents' house, we see a very large salt and pepper shaker, just like Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hi, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hello, Steve. Hello, Steve.
And in the clinic...
Are those like comically large? Like, so that it's gonna grab people's attention, or are they just like normal salt and pepper shaker? Because you can't, I mean, which house doesn't have pepper and salt?
We can see a red bucket just like Steve's friend, Pale.
Hello, Pale.
Hi, Steve.
Also, when Steve left the show to go to college, he left on a blue bus.
Bye.
And when Kevin escaped the clinic, in his pocket he had a schedule for the Greyhound.
Here you go.
Amtrak schedule, Greyhound schedules.
Which is also a blue bus.
When did he go to college? When did he go to college? Was that after or before this episode was made? Because if it was after, would the actual creators of Blue's Clues be actually using this episode of Law & Order to get ideas or something like that then, instead of the other way around?
Alright, those are some more interesting connections, but you're probably still not completely sold yet, right? Well, check this out. When Steve eventually left the show to go to college...
See, I thought he left the show to go to college not that long ago, but you're saying, like, it's... Maybe I got the wrong impression, but I thought you were saying that he went into Law & Order back in, like, 1995 or something like that. Like a year or, like, right after the pilot episode of Blue's Clues. So, like, the timelines just aren't making sense. They're completely, like things are reversed.
He was replaced by his younger brother, Joe.
Oh, hi. It's me, Steve's brother, Joe.
And later, Joe got replaced by their cousin, Josh.
Hi.
I am not familiar with any of this. I knew Steve left. I thought that was because he was balding. but I am not familiar with any other people.
Hey, it's me, Josh.
And not only does Kevin also have a younger brother, but at the clinic,
What's his brother's name? Is it Josh?
there is a nurse named Joe.
What's your name?
Joe Garvey. Joe Garvey, you're under arrest for assault.
Well, he's not Asian.
And an occupational therapist named Josh.
Take a look at
He's not Asian either, but he is wearing blue.
complaint. An occupational therapist, Josh Bingham, was dropped.
I think that Kevin is taking aspects from his real life, like the objects or the names of the people working at the clinic, and applying them to his fantasy. Also, this one is less impressive, but the name Kevin is also the name of the Blues Clues UK host.
Hello out there. It's me, Kevin.
Also,
I did not know they had a UK version of it.
check this out. Kevin's behavioral clinic has the same initials as Blues Clues. Huh?
Come on now, you might be reaching a little bit with that one. You might be reaching a little bit with that one. There are a lot of similarities. I think you also may be reaching in aspects.
That one's also not that impressive, I know. But wait. If this theory is true, and all of this is just inside of Kevin's head, then why does the main character of his fantasy keep changing?
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in.
Hi, come on in.
Well, at first,
Yeah, that would mean like he's got multiple personality disorder because he was the main character of his fantasy. And so he's probably looking at his fantasy from his own perspective. But then all of a sudden it changes to a different person, which means that his fantasy is now changed to him being someone else.
I thought maybe Joe and Josh could actually just be from two different kids who took Kevin's spot in the clinic after he died. But the clinic gets shut down at the end of the episode.
You made them close the clinic.
So they would all have to be from Kevin. But why? Well, we're told that Kevin has tried to escape from the clinic before.
Well, we called the police this morning as soon as the clinic told us that Kevin ran away. He's done this before.
So what if every time a host leaves Blues Clues,
That's when they actually get that in real life.
it's actually Kevin trying to escape the clinic, and when he's inevitably put back inside,
He's done this before.
his fantasy resets with a new Blues Clues host.
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in. Hi.
What? Okay, I have an issue here with this. If all this is taking place in Kevin's head, he would be the main character, right? And just as the first part, when Steve is the main character of it, that's Kevin. So all of a sudden, the show changes, Blue's Clues changes, and now a different person's there. But if this is still in Kevin's head, and how is he viewing his own world? Where he's not even in his world, he's viewing it as he's being a different person. He is now Joe. He's now these, like, do you understand what I'm trying to say? I'm having issues trying to put it into words, as per usual. But I feel like this doesn't make sense.
Hey, come on in.
Okay, so there is a surprising amount of connections here. You can't deny that. But it still kind of feels like we're missing something. Like, I can see why Kevin would imagine a fun, colorful world to escape his abuse, but why is Kevin's fantasy so focused on playing a scavenger hunt game with a blue dog? As far as I can tell, there's nothing similar to that in this episode. Well, I think to answer this, we need to take a closer look at what Blues Clues actually is. At the beginning of the Law & Order episode, Kevin's doctor explained to the detectives why Kevin harmed himself.
It's pretty common with some autistic children. It's frustration because of their inability to communicate.
It's frustrations because of his inability to communicate. Now, autism is a spectrum, and it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than the way TV shows like this tend to portray it. But it is true that some people with autism have varying levels of difficulty communicating. And I think this becomes interesting when we take a look at what Blues Clues actually is.
Well, what story should we tell? Great idea. We'll play Blue's Clues to figure out what story Blue wants us to tell.
It's a
So the dog's autistic?
game where you try to understand Blue, a character who has an inability to communicate. This is literally the entire premise of the show. So I think that this is telling us that Blue represents the side of Kevin who struggles to communicate with others. Okay, but where did the idea for a blue dog come from? Like I said, I couldn't find any references to dogs in this episode. The closest visual was this vaguely blue drawing in Kevin's room that I can't...
You better not try to draw a correlation between that. That's like a friggin' bus or something.
Seatbelts, everyone!
Really make out. Or this teddy bear that kind of had a similar pattern to Blue, but nothing really concrete, which is weird because Blue is such a major part of this fantasy. But then I realized it doesn't matter if we can't find a direct connection, because in Blue's Clues, Steve didn't actually adopt Blue. In a flashback episode of Blue's Clues, we learned that when Steve was younger, he read a book about a blue dog.
It's a book about a puppy.
Which caused Blue to magically come to life.
Spot Satan!
And I think this is also probably what happened with Kevin. We see that the Children's Behavioral Clinic is full of what we can reasonably assume are children's books. Maybe there's a book in here that also gave Kevin the idea for a blue dog, just like Steve. In fact, this idea of a...
I don't know. I mean, until you find further evidence of that, that's just speculation, and that's not really going to help the theory. I'm still kind of like, I have mixed feelings regarding this. Obviously, there's a lot of situations in here which makes me think they're correlated, and it's kind of hard to deny it. I just don't understand the whole timeline, and I have to go back in post-editing. You know what? I'll do it right now. Okay, so I'm just reading a little AI summary here, but Blue's Clues was created September 8, 1996. That's when it was premiered, okay? 96. Now, I went over to the actor, and then I searched up when they appeared in the Law and Order episode. That was 1995, so that was around a year before Blue's Clues was actually made. This makes so much more sense. As I'm editing this, I mean, it actually makes even less sense. Like, how could they put references to a show before the show was even released? What?
Children's book giving Kevin ideas for his fantasy is exactly what we see at the start of the Blue's Clues intro.
Hi, it's me, Steve.
Every single episode of Blue's Clues starts with a stack of children's books in the real world, before going inside of a book called Blue's Clues where the episode takes place. The show literally tells us every episode that Steve's world is fake and comes from a book. And I think this
that's interesting.
Real world full of children's books is actually the Law and Order Behavioral Clinic. And if this is true, that also means that there's probably a book literally called Blue's Clues in the clinic that Kevin is basing his fantasy off of. So even if we never see a blue dog or even hear the name Steve in this Law and Order episode, Kevin still could have gotten all of those ideas from an existing Blue's Clues book in the clinic. Now, the only thing that doesn't really fit with this idea is mail time.
Hello, mailbox.
Hi, Steve. Have I got a letter for you?
Sure, maybe the talking purple mailbox was just something from the book, but there's no way Steve watching videos of kids in the real world would be something in a children's book.
Look, it's a letter from our friends.
Hi, Steve. This is where we play with our blocks. This goes that way.
So, what are these videos? Well, the behavioral clinic is full of other children.
You want to see what a good day is for some of these
So it's like him watching other kids or something play with blocks?
kids?
So I think these videos are Kevin's perception of the other kids. There is just an undeniable amount of connections and similarities between this episode and this show. It just really feels like Blue's Clues is all a fantasy inside of Kevin Jeffries' head. But
I would say it definitely seems like that. So it must have been like Steve Burns, the actor here. It must have been him like trying to, because he didn't write this episode of Law and Order, right? So it's not like he was able to put in whatever he wanted. He was just an actor, right? So what could have been was that he may have gone back to the episode that he was in and then took aspects of it and tried putting it into his own show.
at this point, you're probably wondering, could any of this actually be intentional? Like, if this theory is true, does that mean that the entire plot of Blue's Clues was actually secretly based on this one random episode of Law & Order?
That's kind of what I've been going against this whole video, is that it just hasn't made sense for this reason. But what you're saying in this episode of Law & Order, it definitely seems to correlate with Blue's Clues. But I'm saying, like, logically, it doesn't make sense for, like, the writers. They had no idea what any of this was, so it has to be Steve Burns putting this stuff in.
I'll admit, that seems unlikely, especially since this episode came out a year after the Blue's Clues pilot was filmed.
Oh, the Blue's Clues pilot was 1994. But at first, like, it premiered in 1995, though.
I think it's a lot more likely that if this was intentional, then it was probably just the Law & Order creators deciding to secretly connect these two shows on their own. Maybe just because they thought it would be funny, I don't know.
Maybe Steve Burns told them about the plot of the pilot and they decided to incorporate it. Maybe, but, like, I don't think so, because that's an awfully large amount of detail to just tell someone, right? It's not like he was saying, oh yeah, I was in this show about some blue dog where I helped solve mysteries. No, like, the amount of stuff that you have found in here is so niche or so minuscule, like salt and pepper. Why would Steve here be, like, telling these writers, have, like, a 30-minute conversation? Oh yeah, there's these salt and pepper that I talked to. Oh yeah, there's this red bucket. You're not going to say that. You're going to do a quick summary of what you're doing. Like, oh yeah, I piloted a show about this dog, this blue dog who I help solve mysteries with. And that's kind of going to be the end of it, right? You're not going to go into extreme detail about every aspect of the show. Oh, this red bucket. Oh, so then the Law & Order episode, they're like, let's put a red bucket in. That doesn't make sense.
Oh, or maybe it's some weird mixture of both? Because even years after this episode came out, Blue's Clues does still seem to weirdly line up with it. I honestly don't know. And to be fair, this could all still just be a bunch of weird coincidences and that's it. But regardless of the creator's intent, it still works, you know?
It does.
And it makes talking about Blue's Clues a lot more interesting. And at the end of the day, I think that's kind of the point of all of these edgy Blue's Clues fan theories. And this was originally where I planned on ending this video.
Until...
But there was still one lingering question that was bothering me. If Blue's Clues really is just inside of Kevin Jeffries' head, then what about when Kevin died at the beginning of the episode? I mean,
that would mean every single episode of Blue's Clues that has came after, he died. Because if he died, that would mean that every single episode of Blue's Clues that has ever existed actually came before. So when he was in the clinic, all these episodes are actually just from when he was in the clinic.
I mean, I guess we can just say that the entire Blue's Clues timeline takes place before Kevin's death, and if the show ever gets canceled, then we can just say that that is when Kevin died and the fantasy ended. But what if I told you we've already seen Kevin's death inside of Blue's Clues? So when
he got on the bus and left. But in that case, how does the fantasy still keep going if he's no longer around to fantasize about it? How is he? That doesn't make any sense either.
Recently watched the new Blue's Clues movie from 2022 called Blue's Big City Adventure. And not only did I find even more similarities between this movie and the show, but I believe that this movie is showing us the day that Kevin died and the true end of the Blue's Clues timeline. So this movie is about Josh, the newest host of Blue's Clues, going on a big adventure to audition for a Broadway musical in New York City.
Blue, we are definitely not in storybook world anymore.
It's kind of what you'd expect out of a modern day Blue's Clues movie.
And that is why I have not seen it.
He goes on a journey to the real world and gets lost. There's lots of wacky hijinks, but in the end, he finds his way and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes. What?
But if you watch this movie with this theory in mind, so many things take on a whole new meaning. The first thing that immediately caught me off guard was the opening song.
It's a brand new day.
This song is about starting the day, and Josh keeps saying, "Good morning."
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning,
And literally, the first thing we hear Kevin Jeffries say is good morning.
So is Donovan. Good morning, how are you?
Despite it clearly being night. We also
That is weird.
hear this line in Josh's song.
This life is just like a beautiful dream.
Hint, hint, hint.
This life is just like a beautiful dream. Interesting. And while Josh sings, the other characters keep telling him to wake up.
Wake up! Wake up!
It's a brand new day.
Right away, this
That is odd that would be the lyrics in your song, wake up, wake up. Oh, but then you're also saying good morning in it, so maybe it's like you're trying to wake someone up out of bed.
This movie feels different, like it's trying to draw attention to the fact that this world is just Kevin's fantasy and it's time for him to leave it. Josh leaves his fantasy world to go to the audition in New York, just like how Kevin escapes the clinic at the start of the episode. And just like Kevin, Josh immediately seems very disoriented by the outside world. Until, of course, his fantasy starts to take over to protect him from reality. But what's interesting about this...
That does seem like his brain is protecting him from, what's going on. So he's going back into a fantasy, so he's going to like a fantasy world.
Movie is that for the very first time ever, we get these little glimpses of Blue's Clues from other people's perspectives.
Don't you think so, Madam Mustard? Oh? Whoa! Mr. Schultz! Mrs. Pepper! Am I glad to see you? Oh my God!
Like I said, this movie feels different. We learn that Josh's audition is at 3 o'clock, and the whole movie is just him trying to find the audition before time runs out.
It's almost time for my audition. Oh my gosh. We don't have much time, Blue.
Could this be why Kevin kept asking people what time it was?
What time is it? What time? What time?
Josh also doesn't know where his audition is.
That doesn't make sense, though. In the episode, in this movie here, he's auditioning for something, so he's worried about the time for that. But then in the episode, in the Law and Order episode, which would be the real life, I guess, he's asking about the time. What does he have an audition in the real world too? That doesn't make any sense. As I'm editing this, it gives me more time to think, and maybe what he's saying is that, he's in such a delusional state that he thinks he's auditioning in this dream reality, but in the real world, this is how he looks, like a meth addict or something. They're kind of in their own reality on the inside, but on the outside, they look like they do. So maybe that's kind of what you're insinuating?
All he knows is that it's in a theater somewhere.
Excuse me. Do you know the address to the theater? Which theater? I don't know which theater.
Maybe this is why Kevin went to a movie theater after he escaped, because he thought it was his Broadway audition. Now, in the Law & Order episode, shortly after leaving the theater, Kevin gets arrested and then tragically dies in police custody. But that's not what happens in this movie. Josh goes to the theater and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But
he's playing Abraham Lincoln.
Instead of him leaving and dying like Kevin, we immediately cut
I guess we all know how that ended.
to him performing the musical in a big climactic finale.
My dream is a reality.
So, if this movie really is Kevin's final escape, then what if this is what Kevin experiences as he dies?
What a horrible way to go.
And I can feel my world changing.
A massive final magical song where he's surrounded by all of the friends from his fantasy, the only people who ever really understood him. Even the old hosts show up for this final send-off for Kevin.
And thank you for making this a day and an adventure that I will never forget.
I'll never forget how you helped me find all those clues. Thanks
Looks like he forgot how to blink, though.
again for all your help.
No, really.
Blank!
Now it's over.
Blank!
so long.
None of them are blinking.
And that is sadly where Kevin Jeffrey's story ends. Now, I know this final movie theory maybe doesn't have as much evidence as the rest of my theory.
Yeah, no, I'd say this is the weakest part of it. I don't really think it is anything. I don't think it's anything to do with it. I do think it's funny though, seeing how like the real life people are like interacting with him, and he's like going all schizo, and people are like, I don't know what to do.
But regardless, I like thinking that maybe Kevin found some peace in his final moments. And yeah, I know that this movie came out 27 years after the Law & Order episode, so it's probably a stretch to say that they're still connected. Wait, is that fucking B.D. Wong?
I'm the director of Rainbow Puppies Broadway musical.
B.D. Wong from Law & Order SVU is the fucking director
Wait, that is?
of Josh's musical?
I'm not entirely comfortable labeling the suspect a serial killer. We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Holy shit!
We just figured out Blue's Clues. We just figured out Blue's Clues. We just figured out Blue's Clues.
Because this is my job. This is actually my job.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, was B.D. Wong, was he the director of the original Law & Order episode as well, or just this? Because if he was the director of the original episode as well, I would say that's even a stronger correlation.
All right, that is my theory. Thank you so much for watching. Hope I didn't ruin Blue's Clues for you.
Anyway, I'm gonna end it here. I think the theory's pretty good. There are a lot of things that Blue's Clues and that episode of Law & Order have in similarity, I would say, and I definitely don't think it's a coincidence. What I think probably happened is that Steve, after being in the episode of Law & Order, decided to... I'm obviously taking a stretch with this, but maybe what happened is that... Because I don't think the writers of this Law & Order episode all of a sudden decided to base the episode off of this actor from another show, which it only had a pilot, not even a premiere or anything else. That doesn't make sense. So what I'm thinking is that Steve, since he was in this episode of Law & Order, may have decided to draw correlations himself by looking back at this episode of Law & Order and picking out things that he could include in Blue's Clues, which later down the road would end up with people, finding the similarities themselves. I think that's most likely what happened, at least in my opinion. But yeah, if you guys like this, go subscribe to Alex Bale if you're new, subscribe as well. With that being said, I'll see you guys next time. Oh yeah, what I'd rate this out of a 10? Since I have found a lot more issues with this compared to some other theories, at least in terms of, I was definitely finding more issues with this compared to the last episode, which I think was a SpongeBob. Everything in SpongeBob was like a TV show. I don't think I had any issues with that one. So this one I'm going to have to rate maybe like a 7.2. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time.